The Face of a Mother, The Tragedy of Lisa Trevor. Part 1, The Invitation. Prologue, A House of Light. November 7th and 8th, 1967. The final, discordant chord of a Chopin nocturne hammered through the quiet air of the Trevor household, followed by an immediate, frustrated groan. 13-year-old Lisa Trevor slumped over the polished ebony of the grand piano, her forehead resting against the cool wood of the music stand. The sheet music, a complex tapestry of notes her fingers couldn't quite weave correctly, seemed to mock her with its silent, intricate perfection. The late autumn sun, heavy and golden, streamed through the large bay windows of the parlor, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, silent stars. Outside, the world was a riot of red and orange as the maple trees on their quiet suburban streets surrendered to the season. But inside, the only drama was the battle being waged between a girl and a piano. "I'm never going to get it," she muttered, the words muffled by the wood. "Karen can play this with her eyes closed. She's already moved on to Rachmaninoff." From the kitchen, a warm, comforting voice floated out, wrapped in the scent of roasting chicken, rosemary, and baked apples. "And Karen has been playing for 2 years longer than you, my love. Comparison is the thief of joy." Jessica Trevor moved with a practiced, unhurried grace, her presence the undeniable center of the home's gravity. She wiped her hands on her apron, a faint dusting of flour on her cheek that she was unaware of. She leaned against the doorframe between the dining room and the parlor, her expression a mixture of amusement and sympathy as she watched her daughter's theatrical despair. "Besides, you're almost there. The adagio section was beautiful. You just need to be patient with the transition to the allegro. It's a very difficult piece." Lisa sighed dramatically, a gust of air that ruffled the pages of her sheet music. She pushed herself up from the piano bench, the polished wood cool against her legs. "It's not about patience, Mother. My fingers just won't do what my brain is telling them to. They're traitors." She ran a hand through her long brown hair, the very picture of teenage exasperation. "What if the piano Lord Spencer got is too fancy? Daddy said it was a Bosendorfer Imperial. That's what professional concert pianists use. What if I can't even play chopsticks on it, and I just sit there and make a fool of myself in front of a real-life lord?" "You are physically incapable of making a fool of yourself," Jessica said, walking into the room. She smelled of cinnamon and warmth, a comforting, maternal scent that immediately soothed the frayed edges of Lisa's frustration. She smoothed down her daughter's hair, her touch of familiar comfort. "And you won't be playing chopsticks. You'll play this nocturne beautifully because you've worked so hard on it. And if you make a mistake, who cares? Lord Spencer is just a man, Lisa. A very rich and eccentric man, perhaps, but just a man." "A man who lives in a castle his daughter's father built," came a booming voice from the end of the hall. A triumphant, "Aha!" echoed from the study, followed by the crisp snap of a blueprint being unrolled. George Trevor emerged, a wide, proud grin on his face. He was a large man, built like the foundations of the buildings he designed, broad-shouldered and solid, but he moved with the contained energy of a brilliant mind that never truly rested. For the last 3 years, that mind had been consumed by the Spencer Commission. His study, once a sanctuary of leather-bound books and quiet contemplation, had become a chaotic nest of drafting paper, graphite pencils, and complex architectural models that looked like the skeletal remains of impossible beasts. He held up a rolled tube of drafting paper like a king holding a scepter, his eyes alight with a creative fire that made him seem larger than life. "The final piece of the puzzle," he announced. "The locking mechanism for the East Wing Gallery. A little puzzle for our esteemed host, based on the myth of Helios and his golden chariot. The sequence is tied to the changing position of the sun. He'll love it." "He'll love the entire house, George," Jessica said, her smile warm but tinged with a familiar, gentle weariness. "But I, for one, will be glad when you can think about something other than pressure plates and counterweights for a while. You were mumbling about aqueducts in your sleep again last night." "Nonsense," he chuckled, walking over to wrap an arm around her waist. His touch was always gentle, a stark contrast to his sheer size. "This is our masterpiece, our ticket to a legacy, an immortality of stone and mortar." He looked over at his daughter, his expression softening. "And you, my little songbird, will be one of the very first to play that beautiful piano in a hall worthy of its sound. A hall I designed specifically for its acoustics." Lisa's frustration with her music seemed to melt away, replaced by the familiar excitement that filled the house whenever the mansion was mentioned. Will he really be there all weekend? He wouldn't miss it for the world. George beamed, his enthusiasm infectious. He's been a most generous and enthusiastic patron. This weekend is as much for him as it is for us. A celebration of a vision made real. He's still a bit eccentric from his letters, Jessica mused, the fleeting shadow of concern in her eyes more pronounced this time. She moved towards the dining room, calling over her shoulder. Lisa, darling, set the table, please. As she disappeared into the kitchen, her voice lowered slightly, meant only for George, the insistence on the underground passages being so extensive. The asymmetrical designs. George, he asked for a room with no windows that could only be locked from the outside. What kind of person requests that for a home? George followed her, his booming confidence filling the smaller space of the kitchen. An art collector, my dear. He called it a light-proof vault for his most delicate tapestries. You must understand, men like Spencer don't think like we do. They operate on a different level. The truly great are always eccentric. You can't have vision without a little madness. Besides, he's a perfect gentleman, an aristocrat of the old school. He knelt beside the piano bench where Lisa had been sitting, his gaze softening as he looked at the sheet music. It's more than just a house, you know, he said, as if sensing his daughter's lingering anxieties. It's an idea, a place built to stand for 1,000 years, long after we're all gone. And you, Jessica, and I will be the first family to ever sleep within its walls. The first to make it a home. He looked around his own sun-drenched parlor, at the family photos on the mantel, the half-finished book on the end table, the lingering scent of his wife's cooking. He saw it all as a prelude, a stepping stone to the greater life the Spencer Commission promised them. He didn't see it for what it was, a perfect, fragile moment of peace, already numbered in its final hours. At dinner, the table, a sturdy oak piece that had been in Jessica's family for generations, was laden with roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. The familiar, comforting clink of silverware against porcelain was a steady rhythm beneath George's excited monologue. And the main hall, Lisa, you won't believe the scale of it, he said, gesturing with his fork, a piece of chicken speared on the end. The chandelier alone weighs over a ton. We had to reinforce the entire ceiling with steel girders. And the clock, the clock is my favorite part. Spencer wanted something unique, a centerpiece. So, I designed it as a puzzle. It tells the time, of course, but it also conceals the entrance to his private study. You have to know the secret of the goddess. A secret entrance? Lisa's eyes were wide, her earlier frustrations forgotten. Like in a mystery novel? Exactly like that, George beamed. The whole house is full of them. Spencer has a playful spirit. He wanted a home that was also a riddle, a place that kept its secrets. There's a room where the walls shift, a library with a false bookcase, and a statue in the garden that moves if you know the right combination. Jessica listened, a polite smile on her face, but a knot of unease was tightening in her stomach. A playful spirit? The descriptions didn't sound playful. They sounded paranoid. Deceptive. She thought of the letters Spencer had sent, penned in a spidery, archaic script. They were filled with strange, grandiose phrases. He had once referred to the project not as a home, but as a sanctuary for the genesis of a new era. When she had asked George what that meant, he had simply laughed it off as the flowery language of an old-world nobleman. He also mentioned something about a crypt, she said, her voice carefully neutral. For his ancestors, he said. It seemed an odd thing to build under a new house. Tradition, my dear, George said dismissively. The Spencers are an old family. He wants to create the impression of an ancestral home, a place with deep roots. It's all part of the illusion, the theater of it all. I even designed a special lock for it, based on 4 ceremonial masks. Very dramatic. He took a large bite of chicken, his enthusiasm undiminished. You're worrying over nothing, Jessica. This project has secured our family's future for generations. It's a triumph. Jessica looked at her husband, at his broad, honest face, so full of pride and a brilliant, childlike excitement. She saw his genius, his passion, his unwavering belief in the goodness of his work. And she loved him for it. But she couldn't shake the feeling that he was a master craftsman who had just built the most beautiful, intricate, and perfect cage in the world, never once thinking to ask what it was for. The next morning, the house was a flurry of activity. The scent of coffee and frying bacon filled the air. Suitcases, packed and ready, stood by the front door like stoic sentinels. Lisa was in her room, a space that was a perfect reflection of her 13-year-old world. Posters of the Beatles and the Monkees were taped to the walls. Her desk was a chaotic pile of schoolbooks, notebooks, and a half-finished model of a Saturn V rocket. She was on the phone, the cord stretched taut across her bed. "But what if he's cute?" she whispered into the receiver, twirling the phone cord around her finger. "A lord's son has to be cute, right? Like a prince." On the other end, her best friend Karen's voice was a tinny buzz of excitement. "Just don't make a fool of yourself on the piano, Lisa. He'll be watching. You have to be perfect." "Thanks, Karen, that's really helpful," Lisa said sarcastically, rolling her eyes. She looked at her open suitcase. She had packed 3 dresses, her favorite book, and a small worn teddy bear that she was now too old for but couldn't bear to leave behind. "I have to go. We're leaving any minute. I'll tell you everything when I get back on Sunday." She hung up the phone, a small pang of sadness hitting her. A weekend felt like an eternity. She would miss her room, her friends, her life. She tucked the teddy bear under a sweater, hiding it from her mother's potentially teasing eyes, and closed the suitcase. Downstairs, Jessica was doing a final walkthrough of the house. She adjusted a picture frame on the wall, a photo of the 3 of them at the beach last summer, their faces bright with sun and laughter. She ran a hand along the dusty mantelpiece, making a mental note to clean when they returned. The house was so quiet, so peaceful. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9, its deep, resonant bongs marking the hour. A sudden, inexplicable wave of grief washed over her, so powerful it took her breath away. It was the feeling of saying goodbye to someone you knew you would never see again. She shook her head, forcing the feeling away. It was ridiculous. Nerves, that's all it was. A weekend trip to a fancy mansion. It was something to be excited about, not feared. She took a deep breath, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood grounding her. George was in his study, carefully rolling up the last of his master blueprints, the ones he was taking to present to Spencer. He handled them with the reverence of a priest handling sacred scrolls. To him, they were not just paper and ink. They were a testament to his intellect, his vision, his legacy. A House of Light. He placed them in a heavy leather tube. His movements filled with a deep chord of quiet satisfaction hammered through the quiet Everything was Trevor household. His work followed by an immediate frustrated His masterpiece was complete. 13-year-old Lisa Trevor slumped over the polished ebony of the grand piano. "All right, troops," he boomed, her forehead resting from the cool wood of the chariot awaits. Time to go live like royalty. The complex tapestry of piled into the Cadillac couldn't quite weave correctly. Finality seemed to mock her. "I'm never going to get started it," the engine, she muttered, the low purr of the V8 from the kitchen rumbled. Warm, Jessica took one last look at their house, wrapped in the scent of roasting lovely home, bathed in the morning light. "Of course you will, windows like warm, you just need to be patient with yourself." She didn't know why, very difficult but she felt a desperate urge Jessica to Trevor memorize moved it, with a practiced to burn grace. the image into her her presence, mind. the undeniable With a crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. She wiped her hands on leaving the quiet suburban street dusting behind. A flower on they her drove cheek away that from she the was light, of. towards the deep, dark woods of the Arclay Mountains, and the magnificent, waiting cage Why don't you take a break? Dinner will be